There is a very specific, agonizing kind of pain that comes when the people who gave you life look you directly in the eyes and tell you that you no longer exist to them. You don't just lose your family, you lose your history, you lose your foundation. And when it happens because of a lie, the injustice burns a hole right through your soul. My name is Emma. I am 28 years old, and up until 2 years ago, I was the daughter of one of the wealthiest real estate developers in the state. My parents, Richard and Margaret, had it all. The sprawling mansion, the luxury cars, the country club memberships. But in our house, love wasn't unconditional. It was a currency. And all of it was spent on my younger sister, Lily. Lily was 24, stunningly beautiful, and an absolute parasite. She was the classic golden child. While I spent my college years working internships and paying for my own tiny apartment, Lily was handed black credit cards, sports cars, and a massive allowance. She never worked a day in her life. She didn't have to. Whenever she failed a class, crashed a car, or got into trouble, my parents simply wrote a check to make it disappear. I kept my distance, building my own career as a financial analyst at a private equity firm. I didn't want their money. I just wanted their respect. But 2 years ago, the illusion shattered. It was a Tuesday evening when my father called me, demanding I come to their estate immediately. When I walked through the heavy mahogany doors, my parents were standing in the living room, their faces red with fury. Lily was sitting on the velvet sofa, crying violently into her hands. "How could you do this?" my mother screamed, throwing a stack of bank statements at my chest. The papers scattered across the marble floor. I looked down, completely confused. They were offshore wire transfers. Someone had systematically drained over $600,000 from my parents' emergency liquid accounts over the past 6 months. And the destination accounts, they were set up under shell companies registered in my name. "Mom, Dad, what is this?" I stammered, my heart pounding. "I didn't do this. I don't even know what these accounts are." "Stop lying," my father roared. His voice shook the walls. "Lily found the digital trails on the family server. We know your startup investment failed, Emma. But stealing from your own family, forging my signature?" I looked at Lily. She peeked out from behind her hands, still pretending to cry. But for a fraction of a second, she looked right at me. And she smiled, a cold, calculating, wicked smirk. She had framed me. Lily had stolen the money, probably to pay off her insane shopping addiction and secret gambling debts, and she had used my identity to cover her tracks. "Dad, you have to look closer at the IP addresses. I can prove—" "Get out," he interrupted, his voice dropping to a terrifying, absolute whisper. "You are no longer my daughter. I have already contacted our lawyers. You are cut out of the will. You are cut out of the trust. Everything we have is going to Lily. If you ever contact us again, I will have you arrested for embezzlement." They didn't even let me pack my childhood room. They threw me out into the pouring rain. I lost my family in exactly 5 minutes. For 2 years, I struggled. The psychological trauma almost broke me. But I poured every ounce of my anger into my career. I became a senior acquisitions manager at my firm, specializing in buying distressed debt. I became cold. I became successful. And then, 3 weeks ago, a new portfolio of highly toxic, defaulted loans landed on my desk. I was sipping my coffee, casually flipping through the files of people who were about to lose everything. But when I turned to the 3rd page, my blood turned to absolute ice. The debtor was Lily. My perfect golden child sister hadn't stopped at stealing $600,000. Over the last 2 years, she had secretly taken out multiple high-risk, illegal, predatory loans to fund a lavish, fake billionaire lifestyle. And she had used my parents' $5 million estate as the collateral. Lily had defaulted. The debt was massive. And now, the predatory lenders were preparing to seize the house, evict my parents, and completely destroy them financially. My parents had given Lily everything, and she had secretly gambled their entire lives away. I sat in my office, looking at the legal summons and the eviction notice. I could have just thrown the file away. I could have let the bank destroy them. Instead, I picked up the phone, called my firm's director, and bought my sister's debt myself. I wasn't just going to watch my family fall apart. I was going to be the one holding the hammer. It took exactly 3 days and 2 closed-door meetings with my firm's senior partners to finalize the acquisition of the debt. My company buys toxic portfolios for pennies on the dollar. Usually, we liquidate the assets, auction off the houses, and move on. It's strictly business, but this wasn't business. This was a surgical strike. Sitting in my high-rise office, I finally had the clearance to open the master file on my sister's loans. I spent an entire night going through hundreds of pages of financial records, bank statements, and legal contracts. What I found was a level of deception so deep, so incredibly reckless, that it actually made me sick to my stomach. Lily hadn't just taken out a loan. She had built a massive, fragile house of cards. Over the last 2 years, while my parents thought she was finding herself as an influencer and a lifestyle entrepreneur, she was bleeding them dry. She had convinced my father, the same man who threw me out in the rain for a crime I didn't commit, to sign over a partial power of attorney, claiming she needed it to manage the family's new investment portfolios. He trusted his golden child blindly. He didn't even read the fine print. With that signature, Lily had leveraged the family's $5 million estate to secure 3 separate, high-interest predatory loans, totaling over $3.2 million. And what did she do with the money? I pulled up her Instagram account on my second monitor. The screen was a blinding flash of luxury. There was Lily posing on a chartered yacht in Monaco, Lily holding up 6 limited edition Hermes bags in Paris, Lily drinking $1,000 champagne at VIP tables in Las Vegas. She was living the life of a billionaire heiress, funded entirely by toxic debt secured against the roof over our parents' heads. But the money had run out. The shell companies she used to hide the cash flow had collapsed. She had missed 4 consecutive payments. The predatory lenders had initiated the foreclosure process. According to the file sitting on my mahogany desk, my parents had exactly 14 days before the bank seized their estate, froze all their remaining assets, and locked them out of their own home. They had absolutely no idea. I leaned back in my leather chair and looked out at the city skyline. I felt a strange, cold calmness wash over me. For 2 years, I had carried the weight of their rejection. I had spent nights crying, wondering why I wasn't enough, wondering why they chose her. Now, looking at the legal deed to their house with my corporate signature at the bottom, the sadness evaporated. It was replaced by a sharp, diamond-hard clarity. I didn't want to just send a standard automated eviction notice in the mail. That was too easy. Lily would intercept it, lie to them again, and find a way to spin the narrative to make herself the victim. No. If I was going to tear down the illusion, I had to do it in person. I had to do it where she couldn't hide. I picked up my phone and called a private investigator I occasionally used for corporate background checks. "Hey, Marcus," I said, keeping my voice perfectly level. "I need you to pull the social calendar for Richard and Margaret Hastings, specifically anything happening at the Oak Ridge Country Club next weekend." An hour later, Marcus sent me a secure file. Next Saturday evening, my parents were hosting a massive, lavish gala at the country club to celebrate my father's retirement and Lily's supposed success as a businesswoman. Over 200 guests were invited. The elite of the city, politicians, real estate moguls, old money families. It was the perfect stage. Lily was going to stand up in front of 200 people in a designer gown paid for by predatory loans and pretend to be the perfect daughter. And my parents were going to smile and applaud her, completely unaware that they were legally bankrupt. I looked down at the heavy stack of legal papers on my desk, the summons, the eviction notice, the foreclosure deed. I picked up a red pen, signed my name on the final authorization line, and smiled. I wasn't invited to the party. but I was going to be the guest of honor. The Oak Ridge Country Club was exactly as pretentious as I remembered. Massive crystal chandeliers, imported marble floors, and a sea of people wearing dresses that cost more than most people's annual salaries. It was Saturday night, 8 p.m. The retirement gala was in full swing. I didn't wear a ball gown. I wasn't there to play dress up or fit in with their illusion. I wore a tailored, razor-sharp, custom black designer suit. I wore the vintage diamond necklace I bought myself after my first $1 million acquisition. I looked like exact what I was, a corporate predator walking into a room full of soft, oblivious prey. I stepped through the grand double doors of the ballroom. I didn't have an invitation, but the private security guards at the front were from a firm my company regularly contracted. A simple nod, and they let me walk right past the velvet rope. The string quartet was playing a soft Vivaldi piece. Waiters in white gloves floated through the crowd, carrying silver trays of champagne. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, just watching them for a moment. And then, people started to notice. The whispers rippled through the room like a wave. Isn't that the Hastings' oldest daughter? The one who was disowned? What is she doing here? Heads turned. The soft murmur of polite conversation began to die down. My mother, Margaret, saw me first. She was standing near an ice sculpture holding a martini glass. When she locked eyes with me, all the color instantly drained from her perfectly Botoxed face. She dropped her glass. It shattered against the marble floor with a sharp, echoing crack. The music stuttered to a halt. The entire ballroom fell dead silent. My father, Richard, turned around to see what had happened. He followed my mother's terrified gaze up to the staircase. When he saw me, his face didn't show fear. It showed pure, unadulterated rage. The same rage he had 2 years ago when he threw me into the rain. He didn't care that 200 of his wealthiest friends were watching. He stormed across the ballroom, his fists clenched at his sides. "What the hell are you doing here?" my father hissed, stopping at the bottom of the stairs. His voice was low, trembling with anger, trying to keep the scene quiet. "I told you that if you ever showed your face near this family again, I would have you arrested." I slowly walked down the stairs, my heels clicking rhythmically against the marble. I didn't stop until I was standing exactly 2 feet away from him. "Hello, Richard," I said smoothly. My voice was calm, perfectly level. I didn't call him Dad. "Security!" my father barked, waving his hand toward the entrance. "Get her out of here, now!" The 2 guards at the door didn't move an inch. They just stared straight ahead. "They aren't going to help you," I whispered, taking a sip from a glass of champagne I took from a frozen waiter. "They work for Vanguard Security. My firm is their largest corporate client. Technically, right now, they work for me." My father blinked, completely thrown off guard. The arrogant certainty in his eyes flickered. He looked at my expensive suit, the diamonds, the absolute lack of fear in my posture. "Emma, please," a high-pitched, whiny voice interrupted. It was Lily. She pushed her way through the crowd, wearing a breathtaking, custom-made red Valentino gown. She linked her arm through my father's, playing the role of the terrified, victimized little bird. "Why are you doing this?" Lily cried, her eyes filling with fake tears for the audience. "Dad is retiring tonight. Haven't you heard us enough? You stole our money, you broke our hearts, and now you want to ruin this night too?" The crowd murmured in sympathy for her. They looked at me like I was a monster. I looked at my younger sister. I looked at the red dress, a dress I knew for a fact was purchased on a credit line she had secured using the very country club we were standing in as fraudulent collateral. I smiled, a slow, chilling, predatory smile. "I didn't come here to ruin the party, Lily," I said loudly, projecting my voice so the entire front row of guests could hear me. "I came to deliver a retirement gift, a piece of paper that officially concludes your father's long, successful career." I reached into the inside pocket of my black blazer. My mother rushed forward, grabbing my father's shoulder. "Richard, make her leave. She's crazy. She's trying to extort us again." "I don't need to extort you, Margaret," I said, my voice turning to absolute ice. "Because as of yesterday morning, you don't have a single dime left to your name." I pulled out the thick, legally binding folder, stamped with the red seal of the state Supreme Court. The thick, legal folder in my hand felt heavier than lead. It was stamped with the bright red seal of the state Supreme Court. I held it up slowly. 200 pairs of eyes were locked onto my hand. The absolute silence in the ballroom was deafening. "What is that?" my father scoffed, though his voice trembled slightly. "Another forged document? Are you trying to sue us for money you already stole?" "I don't need to sue you, Richard," I replied, my voice carrying clearly across the marble floor. "I buy distressed debt for a living. Specifically, I buy high-risk, defaulted, predatory loans. And this," I tapped the folder with my perfectly manicured fingernail, "is the master file for a series of illegal, uncollateralized loans totaling $3.2 million. My mother let out a confused gasp. "What are you talking about? We have no debt. Our estate is paid off." "It was," I said calmly. I turned my gaze from my parents to my younger sister, Lily. She was still clinging to my father's arm, but her face had gone completely white. The fake tears had stopped. Her eyes were wide, darting toward the exits. "Lily," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "would you like to explain to your father and to the mayor and to all the nice people at the country club why your signature is at the bottom of a fraudulent loan application using his partial power of attorney?" I don't know what you mean," Lily stammered, taking a step back, her expensive red dress swishing around her legs. "She's lying, Dad. She's forging things again." "Really?" I snapped the folder open. I pulled out a glossy 8x10 photograph and held it up for the crowd to see. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a screenshot of Lily's Instagram. Because 2 years ago, when you threw me out in the rain and accused me of stealing $600,000, Lily bought a brand new Mercedes G-Wagon in cash exactly 3 days later. My father squinted at the photo, confusion warring with anger. I pulled out another document. "And then, over the next 24 months, she used your power of attorney to secretly leverage the family's $5 million estate as collateral for 3 more predatory loans, to fund yacht trips, to fund designer clothes, to fund a fake lifestyle business that never generated a single dollar of revenue." The whispers in the crowd erupted into a loud, frantic buzz. The local elite were gossiping. The perfect Hastings family was crumbling in real time. "Richard, what is she saying?" my mother whispered, grabbing my father's arm. "Is that true? Did you give Lily the power of attorney?" "It was just for the new investment accounts," my father yelled defensively, though he looked terrified. He turned to Lily. "Lily, what is she talking about? Did you take out a loan against the house?" Lily looked at him. She looked at our mother. And then she looked at the 200 people staring at her. The golden child, cornered. I had to!" Lily suddenly screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. She burst into real ugly tears. "My business was going to take off. I just needed more capital for the marketing. The bank was supposed to give me an extension, but they froze the accounts." The entire ballroom gasped collectively. My father staggered backward as if he had been physically punched in the chest. "You leveraged the house?" my mother shrieked, her voice cracking. "Lily, we own that house free and clear. How much did you take?" $3.2 million, I answered for her, my voice completely devoid of emotion. "And she defaulted on every single one of those loans 4 months ago. The shell companies she used to hide the cash flow collapsed." I walked closer to my father. The man who had refused to look at the IP logs 2 years ago. The man who had chosen his favorite daughter over the truth. "You didn't read the fine print, Richard," I said softly, handing him the folder. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped it. Because the loans were predatory, the interest compounded daily. The total debt is now over $4 million. And since the estate was used as fraudulent collateral, the bank initiated an immediate foreclosure. Foreclosure? My father choked out, his eyes scanning the first page of the document. No, that's impossible. We can fight this in court. I have the best lawyers in the city. You can't fight it, I smiled, a genuine, terrifying smile. Because the bank sold the distressed debt package yesterday afternoon to a private equity firm. I leaned in, so close I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. I bought it, Richard. I own the debt. I own the estate. And I am not giving you an extension. I bought it. Those 3 words seemed to echo off the crystal chandeliers and shatter whatever was left of my father's pride. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. The man who had built a real estate empire, the man who had banished me from his kingdom, was now realizing he didn't even own the ground he was standing on. My mother collapsed into a velvet chair, burying her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The exact same way I had sobbed 2 years ago in the pouring rain. Emma, you can't, my father whispered, the arrogant bark completely gone from his voice. He sounded small, old. We're your family. That house is your childhood home. You can't just take it. I didn't take it, Richard, I replied, my voice steady and completely void of sympathy. Lily gave it to me, on a silver platter. I reached into the folder and pulled out the 2 final documents, the ones that had been sitting on my desk for 3 days. I held them up, making sure the bold red ink was visible to everyone in the front row. This, I said, holding up the first paper, is an official court-ordered eviction notice. Because the debt is in default and the collateral has been seized, the bank, which is now my firm, owns the estate. You have exactly 48 hours to vacate the premises. My mother let out a loud, agonizing wail. The country club guests were absolutely glued to the drama, some even pulling out their phones to record the fall of the Hastings family. 48 hours? My father choked, his face turning pale gray. Emma, please. We have nowhere to go. All our liquid assets are tied up in the business. Lily drained the emergency funds? That sounds like a problem you should discuss with your golden child, I said coldly, turning my gaze to my sister. Lily was shaking violently. The red designer gown suddenly looked ridiculous on her. She looked like a terrified little girl who had finally been caught breaking a very expensive toy. Emma, I'm sorry, Lily screamed, tears ruining her perfect makeup, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. I was going to pay it back. I swear. Don't do this. I'll get a job. I'll pay you everything. You owe $4 million, Lily, I interrupted, laughing dryly. Unless you plan on working at a coffee shop for the next 85,000 years, you're not paying me back. I held up the second document. It was stamped heavily with the word summons. But the eviction is just the civil matter, I continued, taking a step toward her. Lily shrank back against my father. The real issue is how you got the money, because I had my legal team look very closely at the power of attorney you used to secure those loans. Lily stopped breathing. You didn't just use it for investment accounts. You forged our father's secondary signature on the collateral authorization forms. That's not just a breach of trust, Lily. That's wire fraud. That's grand larceny. That is a federal crime. No, my mother screamed, jumping up from the chair. Emma, no, she's your sister. You can't send her to prison. I don't send people to prison, Margaret, I said, handing the summons directly to Lily. Her hands were shaking so much the paper rattled like dry leaves. The district attorney does. And my corporate lawyers forwarded the entire file, including the IP logs you refused to look at 2 years ago, to the DA's office this morning. I looked around the ballroom. The absolute devastation was complete. The illusion was dead. Happy retirement, Richard, I said softly, turning my back on them. Make sure you pack light. The changing locks are scheduled for Monday at 8 a.m. sharp. Sunday morning. The hangover of reality. I woke up in my penthouse apartment, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and looked at my cell phone. It was 7 a.m. I had 47 missed calls. The voicemails were full of overlapping voices. My mother weeping uncontrollably, my father sounding breathless and panicked. Not a single call from Lily, of course. She was probably busy packing her fake designer bags. I sat by the window, watching the rain wash over the city, and let the phone ring for another hour. Finally, on the 53rd call, I swiped the green button and put it on speakerphone. "Hello," I said flatly. "Emma, oh my God, Emma, please, you have to listen to me." My mother's voice exploded through the speaker. She sounded completely unhinged, her breath hitching with violent sobs. "Please, sweetheart, please." Sweetheart. That was a word she hadn't used in 2 years, not since she stood by and watched my father throw me out into the cold. "I'm listening, Margaret," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. There was a shuffling sound, and then my father's voice came on the line. It was raspy, desperate, stripped of all the arrogance that had defined him his entire life. "Emma, we've been up all night," Richard pleaded. "We looked at the files you left. I called our lawyers. They said there's nothing they can do. The collateral agreements are ironclad. The bank really did sell the debt to your firm." "I told you that last night," I replied coldly. "Was there a purpose to this call, Richard? You have a lot of packing to do. The locksmith arrives tomorrow at exactly 8 a.m. "You can't do this," he begged, his voice cracking. "Emma, I know you're angry. I know we made a mistake 2 years ago." "A mistake?" I interrupted, my voice sharpening like a blade. "You didn't make a mistake, Richard. You made a choice. You chose to believe a spoiled, manipulative liar over the daughter who actually worked for everything she had. You didn't even look at the IP logs. You just wanted an excuse to protect your golden child." "We didn't know," my mother wailed in the background. "We didn't know she was stealing." "And you still don't get it," I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Even after I proved it to you last night, you're still trying to protect her. Where is Lily right now?" Silence on the line. Heavy, guilty silence. "She's hiding in her room, isn't she?" I guessed. "Letting you beg for her? Letting you clean up her mess? Just like you've done her entire life." "Emma, the district attorney's office called me this morning," my father whispered, sounding completely broken. "They are fast-tracking an indictment for wire fraud and grand larceny. They're going to arrest her. She's 26 years old. She won't survive in federal prison. Please, you're her sister. Drop the charges. Give us the house back. I'll give you my company. I'll give you everything I have left." "Your company is bankrupt, Richard," I stated matter-of-factly. "I checked those files too. Lily drained the operating accounts to cover the loan interest before it defaulted. You have nothing left to offer me." I let that reality sink in. I could hear my mother practically hyperventilating. "As for dropping the charges," I continued, my tone dropping to an absolute chilling freeze. "I can't do that. The bank reported the fraud. My firm simply facilitated the paperwork. But even if I could, I wouldn't." "Emma, we are your family," my mother screamed, a desperate, feral sound. "You're tearing us apart." "No, Margaret," I said softly. "You tore us apart 2 years ago. I'm just the bill collector." I didn't wait for them to respond. I hung up the phone. I opened my contacts, selected their numbers, and hit block. I finished my coffee. It tasted better than it had in years. Tomorrow was moving day. Monday morning, 8 a.m. The air was crisp. The sky was perfectly clear, and the changing of the locks happened exactly on schedule. I didn't go in person to gloat. I didn't need to. I had my firm's private security team handle the eviction alongside the local sheriff's department. But Marcus, my private investigator, was parked across the street. He sent me a live video feed directly to my tablet. I sat in my office drinking a matcha latte and watched my parents carry cardboard boxes out of the $5 million estate they had lived in for 20 years. There were no movers. They couldn't afford them. All their credit cards had been frozen by the banks on Sunday night when the fraud alerts hit the system. Richard and Margaret Hastings, the former king and queen of the local real estate scene, were stuffing garbage bags full of clothes into the back of a 10-year-old rented sedan. They looked exhausted. They looked broken. They looked exactly the way I felt 2 years ago when they left me out in the rain. But the real show started at 8:15 a.m. Two unmarked black SUVs pulled into the circular driveway, blocking my parents' rented car. 4 federal agents stepped out. They weren't there for the eviction. They were there for the wire fraud. Through the video feed, I watched my mother fall to her knees on the manicured lawn. I watched my father try to argue with the agents, his face red and desperate. And then I watched Lily, the golden child, the perfect daughter, the girl who had been handed the entire world and still decided to steal mine, walk out of the front door in handcuffs. She wasn't wearing a designer gown. She was wearing sweatpants. She looked terrified, crying hysterically as they placed her into the back of the federal vehicle. The investigation was swift and brutal. The evidence I provided from my firm's audit was airtight. Lily didn't even make it to trial. She took a plea deal to avoid a 20-year maximum sentence. She was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for grand larceny and wire fraud, with no possibility of early parole. Without the house, without their savings, and without their reputations, my parents were completely destroyed. Richard tried to salvage his company, but the scandal was too public. No one in the city would do business with him. They eventually filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and moved into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. They tried to contact me a few more times through third-party lawyers, begging for financial help, begging for an allowance. I never responded. As for the estate, I didn't keep it. The house held too many toxic memories. My firm flipped it to a tech billionaire 3 months later, making a cool $1.5 million profit on the distressed debt acquisition. I took my commission, bought myself a vintage Porsche, and took a month-long vacation to the Amalfi Coast. People always say that family is blood, and that blood is everything. They tell you that you should always forgive the people who raised you. But I learned a very expensive, very painful lesson. Toxic people don't suddenly become good people just because you share a last name. Sometimes the only way to heal from a burn is to be the one who finally puts out their fire. My name is Emma. I was disowned, discarded, and replaced. But in the end, I was the one who collected the debt.